Ladies and gentlemen, as I mentioned recently via a Facebook post, we are commencing a donation of 500 copies of this book, which among other things carries the ruling by a Sephardic Jewish Bedin about the Israelite ancestry of the Igbo people. It also carries several responses of mine, several observations of mine about the ruling at international conferences. It's a loaded book. I think every Igbo and everybody in the world should have a look at it. And it will eventually get around. I will start off this discussion by saying one or two things about a subject I mentioned in my last presentation, cultural genocide. The figure we are forever indebted to, Raphael Lemkin, the Polish Jewish jurist who became the father of the academic study of genocides, told us that cultural genocides are not less devastating, less grievous, less harmful than genocides carried out with force of arms. Because when you take away the culture of a people, it becomes almost impossible for those people to find meaning in life, to know whether to go left or to go right. During one of my recent conversations with an Igbo every Igbo should be proud of, Nze, Charleston Okafor, from the republic called Ogidi, I observed Charleston, assuming we had not begun to do something about Omenana, about Igbo culture. What do you think our children would have done? Our children would have simply dissolved into the mass of aimless humanity. Because I don't think that most Igbos under 20 can identify an Okummo, can identify typically Igbo Mmang, or even know the meaning, the reasons behind the Mmang. Presently, most Igbos don't even know why we have a Mmang, because they don't identify it as a sport. They do not know that it should be on the same level that Manchester United, Chelsea United, and so on and so forth. The fiestas, or I've forgotten the term they use for these events they hold in Brazil. So if this generation had not gone to work, all this would have been lost. And the children we produce would not have been able to do anything about it. And what it entails, what it means is that they will not have had a roadmap for life. I'm going to talk about the Igbo language now. Ladies and gentlemen, Ibadan is not in another planet. Visit Nigeria, go to the University of Ibadan, it's in Yoruba land. Look for a master thesis. A Yoruba lady conducted research about the much talked about relationship or similarities between the Igbo language and the Hebrew language. And her findings, the findings of this Yoruba lady, is that the Igbo language and the Hebrew language are genetically related. A few friends of mine may remember that of recent I have been writing about the misrepresentations of this language, the misclassification of this language, the identification of this Igbo language as Kwa or Niger Congo. I have my reasons for doing so, and I will discuss some of those reasons hereafter. There are other languages that have connections or relationships with ancient Hebrew. By the way, before I proceed, I want to make something very clear. If there is anything Remi Ilona or any Igbo has benefited from the Israelite identity in the last 500 years, the only thing we have benefited from the Israelite identity since the last 500 years is being held to a higher standard by God. When others sin and we sin, we get the rewards twice. Because some people assume that Igbos say we are Israelites because being Israelite is something that makes people great. No. The Igbo identity, the Israelite identity, the Hebrew identity is not more prestigious than the Yoruba, the Fulani, the Japanese, the English identities. The English people have nothing to do with the biblical Israelites, but they are very great people. I want to make this clear. Because some people, they think that Igbos say that they are Israelites because being Israelite is something that elevates you beyond who you are. No, Igbos say they are Israelites because Igbos are biblical Israelites, descendants of biblical Israelites. And acknowledgement of this, giving due attention to the Israelite culture and tradition and history, enables the Igbos to face life with some certainty, with some direction, with meaning. So back to the language again. I checked out where Yiddish is a language developed in Europe by the Ashkenazi Jews. I checked out the family of languages it belongs to. People who define things say this. You could look at it as one of the Germanic languages. Well, the Ashkenazi people, the Ashkenazi Jews, lived in Germany, so there is a connection. This language is written with Hebrew scripts, but it is more German than biblical or later era Hebrew. But at least it is described. It is connected to something. It is connected to something that the Ashkenazi Jewish people can say they have a memory that they have connections to. They lived in Germany. In my own case, until I read it online, even though you can call me a bookworm, even though you can call me one of the most well-read people in the world, until I read that the Igbo language belongs to the Kwa group of families, I had not heard the word Kwa before. What is the connection of Kwa to me? Until I read about the Niger Congo group of languages, I had not heard such a thing before. So why put my language in this category? Meanwhile, recently, One man, he doesn't have an Igbo name. He has a name that is definitely not Igbo. Came to my timeline, dropped one meaningless comment that he had never seen any research connecting the Niger-Congo languages to the Semitic languages. Somebody sat down and said that this is Semitics and this is Semitics. Just like somebody sat down, listed the groups that are descendants of the Israelites without necessarily listing the Igbos, whose culture is exactly identical to the culture of the biblical Israelites, whose religion retained the name the God of Israel gave as a description to the Israelite religion. Somebody did this. That somebody did this is not sacrosanct. Because I do not want to waste time on arguments these days, I deleted the meaningless comments. By the way, Hebrew has been described as an Afro-Asiatic language. Even the Niger-Congo language, group of languages, are African. And when you say Afro-Asiatic, you are talking about them too. But probably some people feel, as Gayatri Spivak said in her book that discusses the subaltern, that the black, she was referring to Indians, but I'm bringing in the blacks now, should not be listened to. But they should check out the Igbo IQ. It is not lower than the IQ of any group anywhere in the world. We shouldn't blow our trumpets, but we know that we can function anywhere as any group can function. So whatever I'm taking, whatever I'm saying, take it very serious. Know that I'm not speaking without making due research. So, if Yiddish and Latino are described in their own terms, are studied in their own rights, study Igbo the same way. Do not lump Igbo, Yoruba, Bini, Asian, Ibibio together and call them one language. They are very, very, very dissimilar. As I had said before, probably in a post, I spent nearly 10 years in Lagos, lived in one room with a Yoruba guy when I was attending law school. I did not know a word of Yoruba. And people who have studied languages said that there is a gap of 6,000 years between the Igbo and the Yoruba languages. And I will still run ahead of others. That is at about the same time that the Hebrew language, or that the language we call Hebrew, to spell things out, the language we call Hebrew, and the Canaanite language separated. At least there is one source, a Yoruba source, saying that the Yorubas are connected to the Canaanites and the Igbos are the descendants of the biblical Hebrews. So if you find any word that both share, simply understand why it has to be so. Hebrew and Canaanite stem from the same source, and the Igbos and Yorubas have lived together in Nigeria for decades. As people borrow traditions, so do people borrow words of languages. But are both languages similar? Can you describe them as similar languages? No, because the world views of the peoples are worlds apart. And your language gives us a clue about how you see the world. The Yorubas believe that their kings are also gods. To the Igbo, the idea that a human being can be a king not to talk about being a god, is arrow abomination. For the Igbos to become used to the idea that a human being can be a king, Britain had to first of all remove them from being Igbos, turn them into Christians, and then get them to the stage that they can accept that a human being born by a woman and a man is inherently higher in status than any other man. I will introduce this book as well. It's a historical novel. It details one of the sad stories emanating from the Igbo community. They were auxiliary priests in biblical Israel. Judaism calls them the Netinim. If two Israelites engage in a fight and the weaker ran into the place of worship of the God of Israel, he got automatic immunity from harm. But in order to earn his living in the place he ran into, he had to join the priests. He had to walk alongside the priests. The Igbos took this tradition from Mount Sinai through early Israel, and when the Igbos were thrown out of the land of Israel, they relocated with this tradition to West Africa. And this tradition was what kept hundreds of thousands, maybe millions, out of the slave ships. I will talk more about this in the near future. But today, this tradition has been misunderstood. They are called the Osu in the Igbo culture. In the next video, I'm going to discuss this more. But just take it from me that this tradition has been misunderstood. They were priests before. Now, scholars who do not want to do their jobs even attach the word outcast to them. So, ladies and gentlemen, share, subscribe to this channel. This is our own network. This is yours. Thank you.